The winter wind cut through Nora Zimmerman's threadbare coat like a butcher's knife as she stumbled down the frozen main street of Llano, Texas. Her 6-month-old daughter wrapped in every scrap of cloth she could spare. Snow was rare in this part of Texas, but January of 1878 had brought a bitter cold snap that froze the Colorado River and left the entire town huddled around inadequate fires, and Nora had neither fire nor home to shelter her child. She had been standing outside the general store for 2 hours, watching the townsfolk pass by with their eyes deliberately averted, their faces tight with judgment and something worse than pity. 3 days ago, her husband had left in the middle of the night, taking their wagon, their horse, and what little money they had saved from his work at the cattle ranch. He had left behind only a note that said he never wanted to be tied down by a wife and screaming infant, that he was heading to California where a man could be free. The landlord had evicted her that same morning when the rent came due, and she had nothing to pay him with. Nora had tried every door in Llano. She had begged at the church, but Reverend Mitchell had looked at her with cold eyes and said that decent women did not find themselves abandoned, that perhaps she should examine what failures in her Christian duty had driven her husband away. She had gone to the homes of the women she thought were her friends, but doors closed in her face before she could finish explaining her situation. The whispers followed her down every street. Abandoned woman. Something must be wrong with her. Probably drove him away with her nagging. No respectable family wants that sort around. The baby, little Clara, whimpered against her chest, and Nora felt the sound like a physical blow. She had not eaten in 2 days, giving the last of her bread to a neighbor woman in exchange for nursing Clara when her own milk had started to dry up from hunger and stress. That arrangement had lasted only until this morning, when the neighbor's husband found out and forbade his wife from having any further contact with a woman who had been cast out by her own husband. Nora's fingers were numb inside her thin gloves. Her feet had lost all feeling an hour ago. She knew she needed to find shelter before nightfall, or they would both freeze to death, but she had exhausted every option she could think of. The temperature was dropping as the pale winter sun descended toward the horizon, and desperation clawed at her throat. She started walking toward the edge of town, though she had no destination in mind. Perhaps there would be an abandoned barn or shed where she could at least get out of the wind. Perhaps she could start a fire somehow, though she had no matches and no strength left to gather wood. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges, and she recognized the dangerous fog that came with cold and hunger. But she forced herself to keep moving because stopping meant giving up, and she could not give up while Clara still depended on her. The sound of hoofbeats behind her barely registered at first. Horses were common enough, and she had learned that raising her head to look only invited more scorn and rejection. But the hoofbeats slowed, then stopped, and a voice called out that made her pause despite herself. "Madam, are you all right?" The voice was deep and warm, touched with concern rather than judgment. Nora turned slowly, her arms instinctively tightening around Clara. The man sitting astride a sturdy bay horse was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he dismounted and walked closer, she could see he was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair and eyes that held genuine worry. "I am fine, thank you," Nora said automatically, the lie tasting bitter on her cracked lips. She started to turn away, but her legs chose that moment to betray her, buckling beneath her weight. She would have fallen if the stranger had not caught her elbow, his grip firm but gentle. "You are not fine," he said quietly. "When did you last eat?" Nora wanted to pull away, to preserve what little dignity she had left, but Clara whimpered again and she felt the last of her pride crumble. 2 days ago, she whispered, but my daughter, she needs milk. I have been trying to find someone who can nurse her, but no one will help. The stranger's jaw tightened, and something fierce flashed in his eyes. What is your name, madam? Nora Zimmerman, she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. And this is Clara. Owen Rafferty, he said, tipping his hat. And I am going to help you, Mrs. Zimmerman. Where is your husband? The question brought tears to her eyes, hot against her frozen cheeks. Gone. He left 3 days ago, took everything and just disappeared. Owen was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made her knees weak all over again. I will protect what others abandoned. The words were simple, but the conviction behind them was like a warm fire on a cold night. Nora stared at him, unable to comprehend why a complete stranger would offer such a promise. You do not even know me, she managed to say. I know enough, Owen replied. He looked down at Clara, who had started crying in earnest now, her tiny face red with cold and hunger. I know a mother who would rather freeze than abandon her child. I know a town full of so-called Christians who would let a baby starve. That tells me everything I need to know about who deserves help. He moved with decisive efficiency, shrugging out of his heavy coat and wrapping it around both Nora and Clara before she could protest. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming, and Nora felt tears start to stream down her face in earnest. Owen swung himself back into his saddle, then reached down and lifted Nora up in front of him as easily as if she weighed nothing. She was too exhausted to be embarrassed by the impropriety of it, and besides, Clara's crying had become desperate now. There is a woman I know about 2 miles from here, Owen said, his arms around Nora as he held the reins, his body blocking the worst of the wind. She has a new baby of her own and a good heart. She will nurse your daughter, I promise you that. Nora wanted to ask him questions. Who he was, where he had come from, why he was helping them, but the warmth of his coat and the solid strength of his presence behind her made her feel safe for the first time in days, and exhaustion pulled her down into a half-conscious daze. She was aware of the horse moving beneath them, of Owen's voice murmuring reassurances, of Clara's cries gradually weakening as she too succumbed to exhaustion. When they finally stopped, Nora roused herself enough to see a small but well-maintained farmhouse with smoke rising from the chimney. Owen dismounted and lifted her down, and she swayed on her feet as he knocked firmly on the door. A woman in her early 30s opened it, her face showing surprise and then concern as she took in the scene. Owen Rafferty, what have you brought to my door? She asked, but there was no censure in her tone, only curiosity. Sarah, this is Nora Zimmerman and her daughter Clara. They need help. Her husband abandoned them, and the good people of Lano decided a hungry baby was not their concern. Can you nurse the little one, Mrs. Zimmerman has not been able to feed her properly. Sarah's expression transformed into one of fierce maternal protectiveness. Bring them inside immediately. Of course I will nurse her. What kind of monsters would turn away a baby? The warmth of the house was almost painful after the bitter cold outside. Sarah took Clara from Nora's arms with practiced gentleness and immediately began to unwrap the layers of cloth. Poor little thing is half frozen, she murmured. Owen, get Mrs. Zimmerman near the fire. John, put on more coffee and heat up that stew from supper. A man who must have been Sarah's husband appeared from another room, carrying a baby of his own who looked to be perhaps 2 months old. He nodded at Owen in greeting and went about following his wife's instructions without question. Nora found herself guided to a chair near the fireplace, and within moments, a blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, and a cup of hot coffee was pressed into her trembling hands. Sarah settled into a rocking chair and began to nurse Clara, who latched on immediately with desperate hunger. The relief that flooded through Nora at seeing her daughter finally feeding was so intense it made her dizzy. She tried to drink the coffee, but her hands were shaking too badly, and Owen knelt beside her chair and helped her hold the cup steady, his large hands warm over her frozen fingers. "Slowly," he said gently. "You do not want to make yourself sick." The hot liquid burned down her throat and into her empty stomach, and Nora felt like crying again at the simple kindness of it. She managed a few sips before John brought over a bowl of beef stew, thick with vegetables and fragrant with herbs. Nora wanted to fall on it like a starving animal, but Owen's continued presence beside her chair kept her mindful of taking small, careful bites. "How did this happen?" Sarah asked quietly, her attention still focused on Clara. "How does a woman with a baby end up with no help at all?" Nora swallowed hard, shame flooding through her. "My husband left 3 days ago, just disappeared in the night. The landlord evicted me when I could not pay the rent, and everyone I asked for help turned me away. They said if my husband left me, I must have deserved it. They said respectable women do not find themselves in such situations." Sarah's face darkened with anger. "That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. My own mother was abandoned by my father when I was a child. She was the finest woman I ever knew, and she certainly did not deserve to be cast out. Those people in town should be ashamed of themselves." "They are not," Owen said quietly, his voice hard. "They are comfortable in their judgments and their self-righteousness. Mrs. Zimmerman, you and Clara will stay here tonight. Sarah and John have room, and Sarah can continue to nurse Clara. Tomorrow we will figure out a more permanent solution." Nora looked up at him through tears. "I cannot impose on these good people. I have no money, no way to repay them." "You are not imposing," John said firmly from where he stood near the stove. "Any decent person would do the same. Besides, Sarah has been lonely out here with just me and the baby for company. She will enjoy having another woman to talk to." "That is true enough," Sarah agreed with a small smile. "It gets awfully quiet sometimes. Besides, Clara here is doing me a favor. I have more milk than little Thomas can drink, and it is uncomfortable. You will actually be helping me." Nora did not believe that for a moment, but she was too grateful and too exhausted to argue. She finished the stew slowly, feeling strength begin to return to her body with each bite. Clara had fallen asleep at Sarah's breast, her tiny face finally peaceful and relaxed. Seeing her daughter fed and warm and safe made something that had been clenched tight in Nora's chest finally loosen. Owen stood and spoke quietly with John near the door while Sarah showed Nora to a small bedroom where she and Clara could sleep. The bed looked like the most luxurious thing Nora had ever seen, with its thick quilts and soft pillows. Sarah helped her remove her damp clothes and provided a warm nightgown, then settled Clara in a drawer lined with blankets that served as a makeshift cradle. "She will be fine there for tonight," Sarah said softly. "And I am just in the next room if she wakes hungry. You need to rest, Mrs. Zimmerman. You are exhausted. Please call me Nora," she whispered. "And thank you. I do not know how to thank you enough." "You do not need to thank me. Just get some sleep." Nora lay down in the bed and felt her body sink into the mattress with profound relief. She thought she would lie awake worrying about the future, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into a deep and dreamless sleep. When she woke, morning light was filtering through the curtains, and she could hear voices in the other room. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her. But then she saw Clara sleeping peacefully in her makeshift cradle, and memory returned. She rose carefully, her body aching and stiff, and found her clothes had been washed and dried overnight. She dressed quickly and went out to the main room. Owen was still there, sitting at the table with John and Sarah, and all three looked up as she entered. "Good morning," Sarah said with a warm smile. "Clara woke twice in the night and I nursed her. She is a good baby, hardly fussed at all once her belly was full." "Thank you," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. "I cannot express how grateful I am." "Sit down and have some breakfast," Sarah commanded gently. "We have been discussing your situation." Nora sat, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon with hands that were still slightly unsteady. Owen leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "I have a proposition for you, Nora. My ranch is about 15 miles north of here. It is not large, but it is growing. I raise cattle and horses, and I do well enough. I have a house with 3 bedrooms and nobody to help me maintain it. I need someone to cook and clean and help with the domestic work. In exchange, I can offer you and Clara a safe place to live, food, and a small wage. It would give you time to get back on your feet and figure out what you want to do next." Nora stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "You would let me live in your house? A single woman and a single man under the same roof? That would ruin my reputation completely." "I think your reputation in Lano is already ruined through no fault of your own," Owen said bluntly. "And frankly, I do not care much what the gossips say. My ranch is far enough from town that people rarely visit, and those who do will see a respectable housekeeper arrangement. If it makes you more comfortable, I can have Sarah come by regularly to act as chaperone." "I would be happy to," Sarah interjected. "And Owen is right. You need somewhere safe to stay and he needs help around the ranch. It is a practical arrangement that benefits both of you." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Nora asked Owen directly, searching his face for some hidden motive. "What do you want from me?" Owen met her eyes steadily. "I want nothing but honest work for honest pay. I told you yesterday that I would protect what others abandoned, and I meant it. My mother was abandoned by my father when I was a boy. She worked herself to death trying to keep us fed and sheltered, and she died when I was 16. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would help women in her situation. I have the means now, and you need help. That is all there is to it." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Nora felt fresh tears threaten. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Sarah urged. "Owen is a good man, Nora. He truly does just want to help." Nora looked down at her plate, her mind racing. She had no other options, no other prospects. Going back to Lano would mean destitution and death for both her and Clara. Owen was offering her a lifeline, and she would be a fool not to take it, regardless of what it might look like to others. She lifted her head and met Owen's gaze again. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I accept your offer." "Thank you." Owen's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features into something warm and approachable. "Good. We can head out to the ranch this afternoon, give you a chance to settle in. Sarah, thank you for your help. We will stop by regularly so you can continue nursing Clara until Nora is strong enough to produce milk again." "You are welcome anytime," Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze Nora's hand. "And Nora, I meant what I said about being lonely. Please come visit often, even just to talk. I would enjoy the friendship." Nora squeezed back, overwhelmed by the kindness of these people who had been complete strangers yesterday. "I would like that very much." After breakfast, Owen went out to tend to his horse and give Nora time to prepare for the journey. Sarah helped her bundle Clara up warmly and packed a basket of food and supplies for them to take. "Owen really is one of the good ones," Sarah said quietly as they worked. "He has helped several people in difficult situations. A few months ago, he took in a Mexican family that was being harassed by some of the rougher elements in the area. Gave them work and protection until they could save enough money to buy their own land. He never asks for anything in return, just does what he thinks is right." "He is a remarkable man," Nora agreed, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "I do not understand it, but I am grateful for it. Sometimes good people just exist," Sarah said with a smile, "rare as they might be." The journey to Owen's ranch took about 2 hours on horseback. Nora rode in front of Owen again, with Clara bundled securely between them. The landscape of Texas hill country spread out around them, all rolling grassland and scattered oak trees, beautiful even in its winter starkness. Owen pointed out landmarks and told her about the area, his voice a comforting rumble behind her. "I have about 300 head of cattle right now," he explained, "and I am building up a herd of horses to sell to the army. I have 3 men who work for me full-time, and they have their own cabin on the far side of the property. Good men, respectful and hardworking. They will not bother you." When the ranch house came into view, Nora felt her breath catch. It was larger than she had expected, a solid wooden structure with a wide porch and good windows. The barn and outbuildings looked well maintained, and there were several horses visible in the corral. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the whole place had an air of comfortable prosperity. Owen helped her down and led her inside. The interior was spacious but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was functional but sparse, and dust covered most surfaces. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, but showed signs of hasty bachelor cooking. "I know it needs work," Owen said, sounding almost apologetic. "I have been focused more on the ranch itself than the house, but everything you might need should be here, and if it is not, we can get it from town." "It is wonderful," Nora said honestly. After days of having nothing, the simple security of 4 walls and a roof felt like a palace. "Where should Clara and I sleep?" Owen led her down a hallway and opened a door to reveal a large bedroom with a double bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the pastures. "This room is yours. There is a smaller room next to it that would work well for a nursery once Clara is bigger, but for now you will probably want her close. My room is on the other side of the house, and there is a spare room in between that I use for storage. You will have plenty of privacy." Nora set Clara down on the bed and looked around the room, still hardly able to believe this was real. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for this kindness." "You will repay me by taking care of yourself and your daughter, and by helping me turn this house into something that feels like a home rather than just a place to sleep between work," Owen said. He hesitated, then added, "My mother would have wanted me to do this. She always said that the measure of a person was how they treated those who could do nothing for them in return. I am just trying to be the kind of man she raised me to be." The raw emotion in his voice touched something deep in Nora's heart. She must have been an extraordinary woman to raise such a son. "She was," Owen said softly. "She really was." He left her to settle in, and Nora spent the next few hours exploring the house and taking inventory of what needed to be done. It was clear that Owen had been living like most single men, focusing on necessities and ignoring everything else. But the house had good bones, and with some effort, she could make it truly comfortable. Clara woke from her nap hungry, and Nora tried to nurse her, hoping that with food and rest her milk would return. To her relief, Clara was able to get a little, though not enough to fully satisfy her. Nora would still need to take her to Sarah regularly, but it was a start. That evening, Owen returned from working with his men and found Nora in the kitchen, where she had managed to put together a proper supper from the supplies she found in the pantry. The table was set, the kitchen was clean, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the house. Owen stopped in the doorway and stared. "I had forgotten what it was like to come home to something like this," he said quietly. They sat down to eat together, and at first the atmosphere was awkward, 2 strangers navigating unfamiliar territory. But Owen asked her about Clara, and Nora found herself talking about her daughter's personality and little habits. Owen told her about the ranch and his plans for expansion, his face animated when he talked about the horses he was training. "I always loved horses," he said. "More than cattle, honestly. They are intelligent and loyal if you treat them right. I am trying to breed horses that are smart and sturdy enough for ranch work but with enough spirit to be interesting. The army pays well for good mounts. How did you come to own this ranch?" Nora asked, genuinely curious. Owen's expression grew more serious. "After my mother died, I worked for a rancher down near San Antonio, saved every penny I earned for 5 years. The man I worked for was good to me, taught me everything about running a ranch. When he died, his widow sold off portions of the land and I was able to buy this section. That was 3 years ago. I have been building it up ever since." "You have done an impressive job," Nora said sincerely. "This is a beautiful property." "It is getting there," Owen agreed. "But it is a lot of work for one person. Having help with the house will make a real difference." Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Nora threw herself into making the house a proper home, cleaning and organizing and cooking meals that brought genuine pleasure to Owen's face. Her milk returned fully as her health improved, and Clara began to thrive, growing plumper and more alert every day. They still visited Sarah twice a week, and the friendship between the two women deepened into something genuine and warm. Owen was unfailingly respectful, always knocking before entering rooms and maintaining proper distance. But Nora found herself watching him more often than she probably should, noticing the way he was gentle with the horses, the way he treated his workers with fairness and respect, the way his face softened whenever he looked at Clara. He had started spending his evenings in the house rather than in the barn, sitting by the fire and reading while Nora sewed or tended to Clara, and the quiet companionship felt right in a way that her marriage never had. Her husband had been charming at first, but that charm had hidden a selfish and restless nature. He had resented every minute spent at home, every dollar spent on domestic needs. Owen was the opposite. He seemed to genuinely enjoy the domestic comfort of a well-kept home, and he was endlessly patient with Clara, letting the baby grip his fingers with her tiny hands and talking to her in a gentle voice that made Nora's heart ache. One evening in late February, after Clara had been put to bed, Nora and Owen sat by the fire as usual. Owen was reviewing account books, and Nora was mending one of his shirts. The silence was comfortable until Owen suddenly spoke. "Nora, can I ask you something personal?" She looked up a little startled. "Of course. What was your husband like? Before he left, I mean." Nora set down her sewing, considering the question. "Charming," she said finally. "He could make anyone like him when he wanted to. He swept me off my feet, married me within 3 months of our meeting. My parents warned me I did not know him well enough, but I thought they were just being overprotective." She paused, old pain surfacing. "After we married, I started to see the man behind the charm. He hated being tied down, hated responsibility. When I told him I was pregnant, he was furious, said I had trapped him on purpose. When Clara was born, he could barely stand to be in the same room with her. I should have known he would leave, but I kept hoping he would change, that he would learn to love his daughter." "That was not your fault," Owen said firmly. "A man who abandons his child is no man at all. You and Clara deserve better than that." "I am starting to believe that," Nora said softly. "Being here, seeing how you live, how you treat people, it has shown me what a good man actually looks like. I do not think I recognized it before." Owen met her eyes across the fire, and something passed between them, a current of understanding and connection that made Nora's breath catch. "You are a remarkable woman, Nora Zimmerman," he said quietly. Strong and resilient and devoted to your daughter. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Nora felt her cheeks flush and looked away, her heart beating faster. "Thank you," she managed to say. "That means a great deal coming from you." They did not speak of it again that night, but something had shifted between them, an awareness that had been building for weeks finally breaking the surface. Nora found herself thinking about Owen at odd moments, noticing the strength in his hands when he carried firewood, the kindness in his eyes when he smiled at Clara, the sound of his laugh when something amused him. She tried to tell herself it was simple gratitude, but she knew it was more than that. Spring came to Texas with a rush of wildflowers and warm breezes. Clara was nearly 9 months old now, sitting up on her own and babbling happily. Nora had put on weight and color had returned to her cheeks, and she felt stronger and more confident than she had in years. She had saved every penny of the wages Owen paid her, thinking vaguely that someday she would need to move on and establish her own household. But the thought of leaving the ranch filled her with a sadness she did not want to examine too closely. One warm April afternoon, Nora was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, while Clara played in the grass nearby with a rag doll Sarah had made for her. She heard hoofbeats approaching and turned to see Owen riding in from the south pasture earlier than usual. His face was troubled and he dismounted quickly. "Is something wrong?" Nora asked, wiping her damp hands on her apron. "There are riders headed this way," Owen said, his voice tense. "3 men I do not recognize. I want you to take Clara and go inside. Lock the doors and stay away from the windows until I come get you." Fear spiked through Nora, but she did not waste time asking questions. She scooped up Clara and hurried into the house, locking the door behind her as Owen had instructed. Through the window, she could see him standing in the yard, his hand resting casually on his gun belt, his posture alert but not aggressive. The 3 riders came into view, rough-looking men on trail-worn horses. They reined up in front of Owen, and though Nora could not hear the conversation clearly, she could read the tension in Owen's body language. The exchange went on for several minutes, the strangers clearly wanting something that Owen was refusing to provide. Finally, one of the men made a threatening gesture, reaching for his own gun. Owen was faster. His gun was out and leveled before the stranger could clear his holster, and even from inside the house, Nora could hear the authority in his voice as he ordered them to leave his property. The men hesitated, clearly weighing their options, but eventually turned their horses and rode away at a gallop, throwing angry looks back over their shoulders. Owen waited until they were out of sight before holstering his gun and coming to the house. Nora unlocked the door with shaking hands. "What did they want?" she asked. "They heard I had a woman working for me and wanted to know if you were available for their entertainment," Owen said, his jaw tight with anger. "I told them you were under my protection and they needed to leave." They did not like that answer, but they were smart enough not to push it. Nora felt sick. "They will come back, will they not?" "Maybe," Owen admitted. "But if they do, I will be ready. Nora, I think we need to make your position here more official, more permanent." "What do you mean?" Owen took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his words came out in a rush. "Marry me. Not a real marriage, not at first. But if people think you are my wife, they will leave you alone. You will have legal protection, and Clara will have my name. We can go to the courthouse in Leno tomorrow and make it official." Nora stared at him, her mind reeling. "You want to marry me to protect my reputation." "I want to marry you because I care about you and Clara," Owen corrected, his eyes intense. "Because the thought of those men or anyone else threatening you makes me want to break things. Because you have made this house into a home and I do not want to imagine it without you. If all you want is protection and security, I can give you that and expect nothing in return. But if you think you might eventually want more, want a real marriage, then I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to be ready." Nora's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Owen, I am damaged goods. I have been abandoned, my reputation is ruined, and I have another man's child. You could find a proper young woman with no history, someone who would not bring you trouble." "I do not want a proper young woman with no history," Owen said, stepping closer. "I want you. I have wanted you since the day I found you on that frozen street and saw the fierce love you had for your daughter. I have wanted you through every meal we have shared, every evening by the fire, every time I hear you singing to Clara while you work. I know it is too soon. I know you need time to heal from what your husband did to you, and I am willing to give you that time. But I need you to know that my feelings are real, Nora. This is not just about protection." Tears were streaming down Nora's face now, but they were not tears of sadness. "I think I love you," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, but I think I have been falling in love with you for weeks now. You are everything good that I thought did not exist in the world." Owen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "Then marry me," he said softly. "Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life showing you what you deserve." "Yes," Nora breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Nora felt something broken inside her begin to heal. Clara, as if sensing the importance of the moment, let out a happy squeal from where Nora had set her down on the floor, and they broke apart laughing. They rode into Lanneau the next morning, Nora sitting astride Owen's horse with Clara in her arms and Owen riding one of his other mounts. The courthouse was a simple building near the center of town, and the clerk who helped them fill out the marriage license barely looked up from his papers, bored with the routine task. They found a judge to perform the ceremony, a kindly older man who seemed pleased to unite a young family. And within an hour, Nora Zimmerman had become Nora Rafferty. Walking out of the courthouse, as a married woman, felt surreal. Owen kept his arm around her waist, and when they passed people on the street, Nora saw the surprise and speculation in their eyes. She held her head high, refusing to be ashamed. She had done nothing wrong, and she was married to a good man who loved her. That was more than most people could say. They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies, and the proprietor's wife, Mrs. Henderson, made a point of coming over to offer congratulations. "I heard about your unfortunate situation with your first husband," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But I am glad you have found someone willing to take you on despite your circumstances." Nora felt Owen stiffen beside her, but she laid a hand on his arm and smiled sweetly at Mrs. Henderson. "My husband did not take me on despite anything. He chose me because he is smart enough to recognize a good thing when he sees it. Now, if you will excuse us, we have shopping to do." She turned away, leaving Mrs. Henderson sputtering, and Owen leaned down to whisper in her ear. "That was magnificent." "I am tired of being made to feel ashamed for things that were not my fault," Nora said firmly. "I am a good mother and a good wife, and anyone who cannot see that can keep their opinions to themselves." Owen's smile was full of pride and love. "You are extraordinary, Mrs. Rafferty." Hearing her new name sent a thrill through Nora. Mrs. Rafferty. She was married to Owen Rafferty, this good, strong, gentle man who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to lift her up. It still felt like a dream. They rode back to the ranch in high spirits, and that evening Owen made a point of moving some of his things into the bedroom Nora had been using. "We do not have to share a bed until you are ready," he said carefully. but I want everyone to know we are truly married. I can sleep on the floor or in the spare room." Nora surprised herself by saying, "You can sleep in the bed. We are married and I trust you." That night, lying next to Owen with Clara asleep in her cradle nearby, Nora felt a peace she had never experienced before. Owen kept to his side of the bed, not pushing for anything she was not ready to give, but his presence was comforting. When she woke in the middle of the night from a bad dream about being back on the frozen streets of Lanniau, Owen was there immediately, pulling her into his arms and murmuring reassurances until her breathing steadied. "You are safe," he whispered into her hair. "You and Clara are safe. I promise you that." Nora believed him. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Nora learned that Owen sang off-key while he worked, that he had a weakness for apple pie, that he was patient and methodical in everything he did. Owen learned that Nora was fiercely intelligent, that she had a gift for organization that helped him manage the ranch more efficiently, that she had a sharp wit that made him laugh. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small intimacies of shared life. Clara adored Owen and reached for him whenever he came into view, calling him Da in her baby voice. The first time it happened, Owen had gotten suspiciously bright-eyed and had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. Later that night, he told Nora, "I want to adopt her officially. Give her my name legally, not just socially. I know her father is still alive somewhere, but he gave up his rights when he abandoned her. I want to be her father in every way that matters." "I would like that," Nora said softly. "She deserves a father who loves her, and you already do." "I really do," Owen agreed. "She is amazing, smart and curious and sweet. How could anyone abandon her?" "Because her biological father was a fool," Nora said. "But we do not need to think about him anymore. We have our own family now." As spring turned to summer, the physical distance between them gradually closed. They began to share casual touches, his hand on her waist as he passed her in the kitchen, her fingers brushing his as they sat together in the evening. The first time Nora initiated a kiss, Owen had responded with such gentle passion that she felt it all the way to her toes. Their relationship deepened from companionship to genuine romance, and when they finally came together as husband and wife in truth, it was everything Nora had never known marriage could be. There was tenderness and passion, laughter and joy, and the profound sense of being cherished that she had never experienced before. Summer brought long days of hard work on the ranch. Owen's herd had grown, and he had several promising young horses ready to sell. Nora helped where she could, and discovered she had a knack for working with the gentler animals. Owen taught her to ride properly, and she found she loved the freedom of galloping across the open grassland with the wind in her hair. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Clara playing at their feet, Owen said, "I have been thinking about expanding the house, adding on a few more rooms." "More rooms for what?" Nora asked, though her heart had started beating faster because she thought she knew what he was suggesting. "For the children I hope we will have," Owen said, taking her hand. "If you want them. I know Clara is young yet, but I would like to give her brothers and sisters someday. What do you think?" Nora squeezed his hand, happiness welling up inside her. "I think that sounds perfect. I want to have your children, Owen. I want to build a real family with you." He kissed her then, sweet and lingering, and Nora thought about how far she had come from that frozen day in January. She had been broken and abandoned, convinced her life was over, and then Owen had appeared like something out of a dream and given her everything she needed to rebuild herself. He had given her protection and respect and eventually love, asking for nothing but the chance to be part of her life. By autumn, Nora discovered she was pregnant. Owen received the news with such joy that he actually swept her up and spun her around, then immediately apologized and asked if he had hurt her or the baby. Nora laughed and kissed him and told him they were both fine. Clara was a year old now, toddling around and getting into everything, and the thought of giving her a sibling filled Nora with contentment. The pregnancy was easier than her first had been, perhaps because this time she was healthy and well-fed and surrounded by love. Owen was attentive without being overbearing, taking on extra household tasks without being asked and making sure she had everything she needed. Sarah came to visit often, delighted by the news and offering advice from her own experience. Winter came again, and Nora found herself thinking about the previous winter, about how close she and Clara had come to death. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, like a bad dream from which she had awakened into a beautiful reality. When snow fell on the ranch, she stood at the window and watched the white flakes drift down, remembering the bitter cold of Lano's streets, and felt only gratitude for how much her life had changed. Clara's second birthday came in January, and they celebrated with a small party that included Sarah and John and their son Thomas, who was now a sturdy toddler himself. Watching the children play together, Nora felt her heart overflow with thanksgiving. She caught Owen's eye across the room, and the love she saw there still had the power to take her breath away. The baby was born in May, during a warm spring night when the air smelled of wildflowers. The labor was hard but not as frightening as the first time, perhaps because Owen was there, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, while Sarah acted as midwife. When the baby's first cries filled the room, Nora felt tears of joy stream down her face. "It is a boy," Sarah announced, placing the squalling infant on Nora's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Owen's face was full of wonder as he looked at his son. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Oliver after Owen's maternal grandfather. Clara was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to touch him constantly and bring him her toys. Oliver was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches, and Nora recovered quickly from the birth. The next few years passed in a happy blur of domestic life and ranch work. Owen's business continued to thrive, and they were able to add those extra rooms to the house. Clara grew into an intelligent, spirited little girl who loved helping her father with the horses. Oliver was a sturdy, cheerful boy who toddled after his sister and giggled at everything. When Oliver was 2, Nora gave birth to twin girls, Alina and Emma, who had Owen's dark eyes and Nora's blonde hair. The house was suddenly very full and very loud, but Nora loved every chaotic minute of it. Owen proved to be a devoted father, patient with the children's noise and messes and endless questions. He taught Clara to ride, read stories to Oliver at bedtime, and could somehow always tell the twins apart when no one else could. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," Owen told Nora one evening after they had finally gotten all 4 children to sleep. They were sitting on the porch in the gathering darkness, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "A full house, children laughing, you by my side. I feel like the luckiest man alive." "I am the lucky one," Nora countered, leaning against his shoulder. "You saved my life, Owen. You and Clara both. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had given up hope." "We saved each other," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "You made me realize what was missing from my life. All those years I spent focused on building the ranch, I did not understand that having someone to share it with was what would make it meaningful. You and the children, you are my purpose now." Nora tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "I love you. I do not think I say it enough, but I love you so much." "I love you too," Owen replied. "Every single day more than the day before, As the years continued to pass, their family grew even more. Another son, Oscar, was born when the twins were 3, followed 2 years later by a daughter named Natalie. The house that had once been a lonely bachelor's dwelling was now bursting with life and love. Owen expanded the ranch further, buying adjacent land and hiring more workers, until it was one of the most successful operations in the region. Clara grew into a beautiful young woman who could ride and rope as well as any cowboy. She had her mother's determination and her father's kind heart, and she remained especially close to Owen, who had been the only father she ever really knew. The adoption had gone through when she was 3, and she bore the Rafferty name with pride. She knew the story of how Owen had found her mother on that frozen street, and she understood that he had chosen them both out of love. Oliver followed in his father's footsteps, showing a natural talent for working with horses and a keen head for business. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. Oscar was quiet and studious, preferring books to ranch work but fiercely protective of his siblings. Natalie was the baby of the family, spoiled by everyone and aware of it, but sweet-natured enough that no one minded. Nora sometimes looked at her large, noisy, happy family and could barely believe it was real. She was now 34 years old, and she had been married to Owen for nearly 12 years. They had built something remarkable together, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. She ran the household with efficient grace, managed the ranch books, and still found time to pursue her own interests. She had learned to read and write more fluently with Owen's patient teaching, and she kept a journal where she recorded the daily adventures of their family. One spring day, when Natalie was 4 years old, Nora was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Clara came in, her face flushed and her eyes bright. At 18, she looked so much like Nora had at that age that it sometimes took Nora's breath away. "Mama, I need to tell you something," Clara said, her voice nervous and excited in equal measure. Nora set down her knife and gave her daughter her full attention. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Thomas Jenkins asked Papa if he could court me," Clara said in a rush, "and Papa said it was my decision." "Thomas is a good man, Mama. He works hard and he is kind, and I think I might love him, but I wanted to know what you thought before I gave him an answer." Nora remembered Thomas, Sarah and John's son, who was now a strapping young man of 19 working his parents' farm. She had watched him and Clara grow up together, had seen the way they looked at each other over the past year. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked gently. "That I want to say yes," Clara admitted, "but I am a little scared too. What if I make a mistake like you did the first time?" Nora took her daughter's hands, choosing her words carefully. "I did make a mistake with your biological father. I rushed into marriage with someone I did not really know. But that experience, as painful as it was, led me to your father, Owen, and to the life we have now. I do not regret it because it gave me you and eventually this entire family. But Clara, you have grown up surrounded by a good marriage. You know what real love looks like because you have seen it every day. Trust your instincts. If Thomas treats you with respect and kindness, if he makes you laugh and supports your dreams, then he might be the right one. But take your time. There is no rush." Clara nodded slowly, then smiled. "He does make me laugh, and he does not mind that I can outride him. He actually seems proud of it." "That is a very good sign," Nora said with a smile of her own. "Then I think you should say yes to courting him and see where it leads." Clara threw her arms around Nora. "Thank you, Mama. I am so glad I have you to talk to about these things." That evening, Nora told Owen about the conversation, and he sighed. "She is too young to be thinking about courtship. She is 18, the same age I was when I married the first time," Nora pointed out. And unlike me at 18, she has a good head on her shoulders and a strong sense of self. We have raised her well, Owen. I know, Owen admitted. But she is still my little girl. I am not ready for her to grow up. Nora kissed his cheek. We do not have to be ready. It is happening whether we like it or not. But Thomas is a good young man from a good family. We could do much worse for a son-in-law someday. Someday far in the future, Owen grumbled, but he was smiling. 2 years later, Clara and Thomas were married in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch, with wildflowers everywhere and all their friends and family in attendance. Clara was radiant in a dress Nora had sewn herself, and Thomas looked at her like she hung the moon. Owen walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle with tears in his eyes, and when the young couple exchanged their vows, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. After the wedding, as Nora and Owen danced together at the celebration, Owen said quietly, "Thank you for giving me the privilege of being her father. She is one of the best things in my life." "She loves you so much," Nora replied. "You are her hero, Owen. You always have been." "I hope I have lived up to that," Owen said. "I tried my best." "You succeeded beyond measure," Nora assured him. The years continued to flow by like a gentle river. Oliver married at 23 to a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county. The twins, Elena and Emma, both became teachers, opening a small school on the ranch property to educate the children of the workers and neighboring families. Oscar went to university in Austin and became a lawyer, returning to Llano to open a practice. Natalie, the baby, married a doctor and moved to San Antonio, though she visited often through it all. Nora and Owen remained the steady center of their growing family. They grew older together, silver threading through their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. The ranch continued to prosper, but they eventually turned over most of the day-to-day operations to Oliver and his growing family, content to advise and enjoy their grandchildren. On a warm evening in June of 1903, Nora sat on the porch of the ranch house, rocking gently in her chair and watching her grandchildren play in the yard. She was 57 years old now, and Owen was 59. Clara had 5 children of her own, Oliver had 4, and the others were starting their families. The house was once again filled with the sounds of children's laughter, though these were her children's children now. Owen came out and settled into the rocking chair beside her, taking her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that winter day in Llano," Nora said softly. 25 years ago now, about how close Clara and I came to dying in that cold and how you appeared like an angel and saved us both." "You would have survived," Owen said. "You are stronger than you give yourself credit for." "Maybe," Nora allowed, "but I would not have lived this life. I would not have known what real love feels like, what a true partnership looks like. I would not have all these children and grandchildren. You gave me everything, Owen." "You gave me just as much," Owen insisted. "I was lonely before you came into my life, even if I did not realize it. You taught me what home really means. You made me a father, which has been the greatest joy of my life. We built this together, Nora. Everything we have, we made it together." Nora looked at the house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. She looked at the barns and corrals, at the thriving ranch that spread out around them. She looked at the grandchildren playing, healthy and happy and loved. And she looked at Owen, the man who had stopped for a freezing woman and her baby 25 years ago and had promised to protect what others abandoned. He had kept that promise every single day since. "I love you," she said, the same words she had spoken thousands of times over their years together, but they never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Owen replied, squeezing her hand. "Forever and always." As the sun set over the Texas hill country, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nora felt the deep contentment of a life well lived. She had known abandonment and despair, but she had also known rescue and redemption. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person, and that love had grown into something vast and beautiful that would outlast both of them. The winter that had made her vulnerable was a lifetime ago now, but she would never forget it because it had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to this love. And that made every hardship she had endured worth it. The children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, and Nora smiled, rocking gently in her chair with her husband's hand warm in hers, surrounded by the family they had built from nothing but hope and determination and love. This was her happily ever after, earned through pain and struggle, but all the sweeter for it, and it was everything she had never dared to dream possible.